Hi, I'm Alvin Pasaoa,
Hello, my name is Kevin Jefferies.
and this is the 635 Podcast. The 635 Podcast is about local politics, economics, and social and cultural issues in the Alvin Community College area. The views expressed on the show are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of Alvin Community College. Welcome to the 635 Podcast. I'm here with Kevin Jefferies. There you are.
Hello.
All right, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about checks and balances.
Checks and balances, the bank, or what are we talking about?
The bank? Well, what we're talking about is primarily the national courts being a venue whereby which individuals are attempting to stop actions, or in one case, command actions on the part of the Texas executive branch.
And okay, so federal, Texas executive,
And judiciary,
and judiciary. Okay, and so what's going on right now in the news that would make this particular topic very relevant and interesting?
Well, there has been a conflict between the Homeland Security Department, specifically Border Patrol, which is part of the Homeland Security Department on the national level, and executive officials in the state of Texas. And I would imagine these are people directly being guided by the governor, and this has to do with activities on the border, trying to stop some folks that are coming across the river, and the laying down specifically of razor wire, concertina wire, and which is largely, apparently, meant to prevent the federal Border Patrol from accessing some of these individuals. There's laws on the books that say if you are a migrant, you're claiming that you're a migrant, the law says that you are to be processed in order to determine whether your claims are legitimate, and if they're legitimate, you can be kept in the United States for a period of time until your case is settled. But the state of Texas wants to prevent that from occurring, and I guess just send people immediately across. But they're also preventing the Border Patrol from doing so, and the national government has sued the state of Texas saying you can't do this, and so this is a case that's headed up to the Supreme Court. It's called Department of Homeland Security versus Texas.
Okay, so I pulled up an article here. Texas border standoff with the Fed continues despite U.S. Supreme Court order. So let me run this through the exact timeline of events here. So we had Texas trying to put up barbed wire, and then it is up, and the federal government wants to cut it down.
Yes.
But they haven't cut it down yet.
They were waiting until, well, they could have just come in and done it, but what they wanted to do instead was to go to the courts and see whether or not the judges would allow them to do it. And so this is gone. There's a process in place. You know, it begins with taking a case to the Southern District Court in this particular case, the trial court, and then it goes up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and I believe that Texas won there. And so the national government then, specifically the Border Patrol, Department of Homeland Security, taking this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has agreed to hear it, and they are going to hear this coming up soon. When is this going to be?
I thought the Supreme Court has already made some type of ruling. What have they ruled on so far?
All right, what happened on January 22nd related to this? An emergency application to vacate injunction pending appeal. So what this means is that the limitation that was placed upon the Border Patrol agents by a lower federal court was vacated, meaning, yes, you can go in, but the appeal is still going on. So a lower court has made a ruling. The Supreme Court has temporarily overturned that ruling until they hear the entire case. I don't know if they have actually set this up for when this is going to be heard in the Supreme Court.
Okay, so a lower court says that the feds cannot go in.
Yes, they can. I'm sorry. Yes, the lower court said no. The Border Patrol, in their appeal to the United States Supreme Court, said, yeah, you can, but we're just going to let you do it for a little while until we have a full. It's like you can until we review this entire thing, And maybe we'll make a permanent decision that yes, you can, or maybe we're gonna go over that. I'm trying to look right now. I'm looking at the Supreme Court itself. I don't know if they've actually set a date for the arguments, the oral arguments. I don't see evidence that they have, but maybe that will come up somewhere. I'm still kind of strolling around right now.
Okay, so we can expect a much bigger case with long-term ramifications coming up. And so far, the Supreme Court has just essentially temporarily said that they can until this sort of big pending case, which will probably have ramifications that last for a long time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And and the state of this right now, the current update is Texas is keeping the barbed wire up, and the feds want in, and so that's
the feds can go in.
The feds can go in, but they haven't done anything.
Well, it says I don't. To tell you the truth, this is a decision from 2 days ago, so I can't tell you exactly what the feds are doing currently. All right, this is a title from a case from yesterday from the Texas Tribune, the 23rd. U.S. Supreme Court says Texas cannot block federal agents from the border. Let's see. U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ordered Texas to allow federal border agents access to the state's border with Mexico, where Texas officials have deployed miles of concertina wire. The order did not concertina wire sounds much nicer than razor wire.
It sounds like a cantina.
Yes,
cantina wire.
Like something you'd sing.
Something I could hang my margarita on or something.
The order did not explain justices' decisions. For now, it effectively upholds longstanding court rulings that the Constitution gives the federal government sole responsibility for border security. That's the key issue right here, and I think at the end of the day, the Supreme Court is going to side with the national government because the national government deals with immigration stuff, not the state of Texas. State of Texas, though, has been passing all sorts of laws recently where they're usurping this, and so that's going to be a current area of dispute.
Okay, it's going to be interesting. So now, how does this tie in then with the big question? Yeah, you had something on your blog, so let me show everyone your blog here. You got the Weaker Party blog that you run, and let me see if I can.
Well, it just gives you links to the nature of the dispute right now. And the reason we do this, and I do this in both of my American government and my state and local classes, because we begin and we're finishing the second week of the semester, and the basic thing we start off with are the United States and Texas constitutions, and to get an idea about what sorts of job descriptions the different levels of government have and how that stems from language in the respective constitutions. And the state is supposed to butt out of international stuff, and this is an international border. Now, of course, Texas is going to come in and say, since we're also on the border itself and we deal with ramifications associated with folks coming over, they have the right to be able to pass laws related to this because of basic security, criminal justice issues or whatnot for folks in Texas that live close to the border. So, there's your dispute. And ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to be the arbiter of this and figure it out. Now, I'm using this, by the way, as checks and balances stuff, and also federalism stuff, because it's the courts that are being used to stop the actions of the state of Texas. So
okay, and these are federal courts, right?
This is a federal court. That's what the United States Supreme Court is. Yeah, the U.S. means federal. And it doesn't have, I'm looking right now for the process itself. There's a place I like to go, and one of the links takes you to SCOTUS blog, which is terrific. It just picks up with things as they are appealed to the Supreme Court. So it doesn't. It would be in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, where the lower court and also the beneath that the district court, which would I imagine Texas has 4 different district courts. This would almost certainly would be the Southern District Court, maybe the Western Court though. This is Eagle Pass, so I would have to look at a map real quick, where the initial dispute would have occurred, appealed to the Supreme Court. The fact that when you look at the case, it says Department of Homeland Security versus Texas tells us the Department of Homeland Security lost at the lower level, and they petitioned for a review in the Supreme Court. So that's why they come first. Texas is the respondent, so they have to argue against the Department of Homeland Security's arguments that Texas is interfering with a national issue, which at root is what they're saying.
Okay, so this link right here, this is the Department of Homeland Security basically sues Texas, and that's the details of that are in this link right here.
Yeah.
Let me read what it says. Whether the Supreme Court should block an order by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit that generally bars federal border patrol agents from cutting or moving razor wire installed by the U.S. Okay, so this is the big one that everyone's talking about.
Yeah. It's been in the news, been newsworthy.
Okay, let me check this link. What do we got? Where is this link? Oh, SCOTUS blog. Okay, and what's SCOTUS blogs? Do they give opinion or analysis? What does SCOTUS
they
blog
do both. There is some analysis, and I'd say more analysis than opinion. Though the difference being that analysis is you're actually looking at the stuff and analyzing what direction something might go. Opinion is just somebody coming in and saying, "This is what I believe."
Mm-hmm.
But they also provide basic information about the actual process. This is composed of people that are part of what's called the Supreme Court bar, meaning people who have they've cleared whatever requirements are necessary in order to argue cases for other people before the Supreme Court. Sometimes these are individuals who themselves have been clerks for people on the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you get to that one link that I have and you scroll down a little bit, you can see all the proceedings and orders prior to this. And you can see it begins with January 2nd. And, at the Supreme Court it does. I mean, prior to this is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, as you can see, they sided with Texas. They said, it's okay for you to prevent the U.S. Border Patrol agents from cutting or removing the razor wire. That's why they didn't do it, because the courts are saying, the initial court, I shouldn't say initial, I'm sorry, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, said, no, you can't do it. So they appealed in the Department of Homeland Security.
And that's the January 2nd. So this is the...
Well, that is the result of the request for a review. Went up to Justice Alito, because he is the individual in the Supreme Court that would have the first... if you have an appeal from Texas... from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, it lands on his desk.
Okay, so this January 2nd, that is a move by the feds, Department of Homeland Justice, in order to get rid of the original ruling saying that. Okay, so this says January 2, the feds, federal government, makes a move to try to essentially overrule what the court said, that it's okay to block the feds.
Basically, what it says here is application to vacate injunction pending appeal submitted to Justice Alito. In other words, before the appeal goes forward, and it's going to take a while for that to happen, what's the decision? In the meantime, can we cut through the wire or not? So the Fifth Circuit originally said, no, you can't. Now the initial ruling from the Supreme Court was, while we figure out what to do, you can cut the wire.
And that was done when?
January 2nd.
January 2nd was where...
That's the application. Well, hold on a second. I think
there was the application, but then the decision...
Oh, well let's scroll down. All right, so January 3rd, response to application requested by Alito. Letter to the clerk from applicants filed, response to application. The applicants would be the Department of Homeland Security. January 9th, response to application from Texas. January 10th, reply of applicant, Department of Homeland Security. Notice these are all linked, so you can look at the legal documents if you want to get into it. There's an amicus brief from something called the Immigration Reform Law Institute, so that would be an interested party. Supplement brief from the Department of Homeland Security, Texas. We've got this back and forth going on the 12th, the 13th, the 15th. Second supplemental brief from respondents. So again, arguments going back and forth. So I guess, the specific answer to your question would be the 22nd, 2 days ago.
So 22nd then is Supreme Court says, okay, yes, you guys can do what you want until we actually have a full hearing and then decide this question.
Yeah, I mean, the specific language is this. All right, application says 23A 607. To vacate injunction, that means, okay, the Fifth Circuit said, injunction, you can't do this. They vacated it. They said, yeah, you can. Presented to Justice Alito, and by him referred to the court is granted. All right, so the Department of Homeland Security says, could you vacate this injunction? And so they did. December 19, 2023 order of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, that's the one that put the injunction in place, is vacated. That means it doesn't matter anymore. Justice Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh would deny the application to vacate the injunction. So what this tells us, there's 9 people on the Supreme Court. These 4 would have continued the injunction. Mm-hmm. They agreed with the idea that Texas should continue to be able to prevent the Border Patrol agents from coming in. The other 5 folks were the reason why that injunction was vacated. Mm-hmm. So that might give you a preliminary idea about how the Supreme Court down the line might rule on this particular case.
I'm kind of, maybe you didn't look at this, but I'm kind of wondering what the legal reasoning against allowing the feds to go in and, cut wire.
What we could do? I tell you what, we could look at the response to the application, respondent Texas. So Texas would make that argument. And if you just click on that, here, let me put my glasses on.
Which date are you looking at?
I'm looking at the one from January 9th, response to application from respondent Texas. Again, they're responding to the
okay, so this
filing.
Is all right.
Texas is on the other side, the right-hand side of the V. On the left-hand side of the V, you've got the petitioner. They're petitioning. They're like, dude, Your Honor, dudes, we don't like this. Please review this. And on the other side, you got Texas, and they, again, like I said, they won at the lower level, and they're like, no, we're fine. So the Department of Homeland Security presented their arguments, and so if we click on the other one, we see the state of Texas's response in opposition to the United States application to vacate injunction pending appeal issued by the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and that's where you would find your argument.
Okay. All right, so basically this is the argument against letting the feds in, and then presumably the 4 justices said, okay, that's a decent argument.
Let me read the opening sentence or 2 or 3. Defendants seek emergency relief pending appeal without making any argument that they did not destroy Texas property directly contrary to basic principles of Texas tort law. Tort law deals with damages. That maximalist view of federal authority is not new. At every stage of this litigation in the district court and the Fifth Circuit, now in this court, defendants have claimed authority to destroy property that belongs to someone else based on their assurance that doing so is necessary to enforce federal immigration laws. I guess what they're talking about there by destroying property is cutting the wire. Mm-hmm. Yet defendants all but ignore the district court's factual findings demonstrating that the premise of their argument is wrong. The evidence presented amply demonstrates the utter failure of the defendants to deter, prevent, and halt unlawful entry into the United States. That's one of Texas's arguments. All right, we're still having folks crossing the border. There's a lot of debate about the number of folks that are out there. All sorts of different numbers are thrown out. But Texas is making that argument. Abbott has been making that argument. It's been a big political thing for a while. That since the United States government isn't doing it to their level of satisfaction, Texas gets to come in and do that. And again, that's effectively what their argument is. Mm. Now, actually, if we look on the other side, though, here, let's look at this. Application to vacate injunction. And this is the original thing. And this is sent officially by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, U.S. Border Patrol, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the senior official performing the duties of commissioner, and a couple of other folks, all related to Homeland Security and the border. Pursuant to Rule 23 of the Rules of this Court and all writs act, the Solicitor General, that's the person who argues things for the United States Justice Department before the Supreme Court, on behalf of the applicants, applies for this vacancy. This case concerns Texas's attempt to invoke its state tort law to enjoin federally authorized activities of Border Patrol agents at the border along a 29-mile stretch of the Rio Grande around Eagle Pass. Texas sued the United States, claiming the federal Border Patrol agents in Eagle Pass were committing conversion and trespass to chattels under Texas law property when in the course of performing their federal duties. They disturbed rolls of razor wire fencing that Texas placed near the bank of the river. So Texas is just upset that their razor wire is getting cut. Mm-hmm. The district court denied a preliminary injunction, but the Fifth Circuit issued an injunction pending appeal. What had been going on, what was just overturned. that's subject to only a narrow exemption, prohibits Border Patrol agents from cutting or moving Texas's wire barriers that physically block agents from accessing the international border and reaching migrants who've already entered the U.S. territory. In other words, there's this area of Texas territory where people have made it across, but they're just kind of like stuck right there. So again, like I said, you have national law saying these folks have to be processed. If they are migrants, if they're fleeing, particular situations, political unrest or whatnot, or they're being persecuted or whatnot, they have the right to be here, or at least in certain areas. And Texas is pushing back against that.
I see.
So effectively what Texas is saying is, well, two things. The United States isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of protecting the border, and it's also in the wrong for cutting our wire.
And then summarize the Fed position.
This is a federal. This is what the federal government does. The federal law here. This would be it. Federal law unambiguously grants Border Patrol agents the authority without a warrant to access private lands within 25 miles of the international border. You ever go around the border?
No.
Closer you get to the border, you got all these places, where you kind of drive through or whatnot. They can search you. There's no probable cause.
So wait, so there's some type of law saying what about 25 miles?
Right here, let me repeat what I just read. Federal law unambiguously grants Border Patrol agents the authority without a warrant to access private lands within 25 miles of the international border, as well as to interrogate and arrest anyone who, in their presence or view, is entering or attempting to enter the United States in violation of the law and is likely to abscond. That's the first this relevant sentence right here to your question. And their argument here would be that the state of Texas is interfering with the ability of Border Patrol agents, federal agents, to perform this function, this legal function.
I see.
And again, Texas is saying, well, we have reasons, and plus you're cutting our wire.
Yeah. Okay. That's
I think
interesting.
that's the extent of what Texas is saying in a legal sense. And again, I haven't exhaustively poured through everything that's been sent in. But that seems to be the crux of it.
So that 25-mile thing, because this whole time I've been wondering, why doesn't Texas, because I thought, the border itself clearly is something in the federal government's purview.
Yeah.
So then I thought, well, why doesn't, Abbott do something like create a state park that runs parallel to the border? So it's technically not on the border, maybe a mile within, define it as a state park, and then say, well, no one can come into the state park without prior permission, and if you're on this property, you're committing a crime.
Well, if you're an immigrant or a migrant, the national government has the right to deal with you. And again, I guess to answer your hypothetical, address your hypothetical. It sounds like the state of Texas would be preventing Border Patrol federal agents from going to that park, which they can't do. That's the basic issue right here. Let me remind myself where Eagle Pass is exactly.
And then one other question about state law and state law enforcement. If the state does, for whatever reason, charge a migrant with some type of state level crime, can the feds come in and say, oh, no, our concerns override any type of state law?
Well, it depends on, it's an interesting thing you're bringing up, because one of the laws that the state of Texas, the legislature passed in the fourth special session that met, I guess it was November, December of last year, they made it a state crime to be in Texas illegally, which basically means. But there's a question about can the state do that? That's a national thing. That's not a state thing. Now, I think there are also some challenges to that. That will, obviously it's a similar issue, not completely the same, but it's very similar. That would also end up in the Supreme Court. And again, it's a basic federalism thing. What does the national government do? What do the states do? Again, things border international issues. Those are state issues. You don't want Texas doing something differently than how New Mexico, how Arizona, and how California is doing it. It's got to be somewhat similar. And I guess the argument is, too, that if you're not happy with how the national government is doing, well, solve that on the national level. You don't solve that in the state level.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, getting back to it's Eagle Pass is near El Paso.
Oh, wow.
North.
I didn't know it was that far on the other side. We're here in Houston, by the way.
Well, not too, not too far away. Let me open up the map real quick and get that.
Is that near anywhere near Big Bend?
It would be further east from Big Bend, not around the bend itself. Around the bend. Let me check this out real quick. Checking out my. Yeah, I think Big Bend is a little more. I'm looking right now. I've been around most of these places. I can't think of the last time I was around Eagle Pass, though. Let's see. There's Laredo, Ciudad Acuña, Piedras Negras. Is that Blackfeet? Piedras?
Texas Military Department continues to hold line in Shelby Park to deter and prevent unlawful entry into the state of Texas. Interesting. What has Texas been doing when they intercept people trying to come into this country? What does Texas do? Oh, I guess I heard about them putting people on buses and sending them out somewhere.
There are a lot of different detention facilities. Actually, I've been going back and forth with some other friends, and we're trying to figure out, the specifics, because there's a lot that goes on.
Are there a lot of state-run detention facilities? I've mostly.
My understanding is that they're primarily federal. Now, I would have to do a little bit more research on what sorts of things the states actually end up doing, but it's primarily a federal thing. Now, obviously, since Texas is on the border, and you have a lot of folks that are coming through, and again, the precise number kind of varies a little bit. When you're talking about people who've been detained, those are folks who've been stopped. Then the question is, like I said again, how do you process these individuals? Now, you're raising a question I can't really answer. I need to do a little bit of research on my own. I mean, those folks that the governor's decided to stick on buses or planes and send to New York or Martha's Vineyard or whatever, where is he grabbing them? I mean, again, you have a variety of different detention places.
Makes me wonder if he either can't legally hold them or maybe just the cost is prohibitive.
About costs, I mean, this gets us into Texas budget, but there's this thing called the general revenue budget that can be shifted around by the governor. The governor has this Lone Star project. What is it? That's not exactly what it is. Operation Lone Star, where something on the order of $3 or $4 billion over the last 2, 3, 4 years has accumulated to deal with a variety of different issues associated with border security. And so I think they got plenty of money.
Okay.
But, as far as the specifics, I couldn't tell you. Like, if somebody came through in Eagle Pass, where would they go? Now, I think there's an effort, and part of what they're trying to do, in my understanding, with, the folks who, make it across the river, but they didn't make it across the razor wire, so they just send them back. Or at least they, there were some drownings recently. It happens kind of regularly, just make it so that they can't pass over.
And this makes me kind of wonder what the scene is like. I mean, are there? Now, by the way, for the Texas, what is it called? Is it the Texas Border Patrol, or what departments?
We have a military. Now, most states do, partially because in the Constitution it says that and this is originally how armies are supposed to be put together. States had a militia ready to go in case it needs to be called up by the United States Commander-in-Chief to deal with stuff. And there's also things like in Texas's Constitution, I would imagine other constitutions do also. You're not supposed to have like any kind of like a standing military, but if you're attacked or whatever, you're in a position to be able to defend yourself. Now, I don't know, what were you saying? I can't remember. What is it like there? I drive around there all the time. I mean, I think you have to go hunting in certain places. I mean, there might be groups of individuals at different times that, you find themselves on the other side, at Eagle Pass, El Paso, I think, what was it, a few months ago, there were some folks who, I guess kind of swarmed the border or something like that. They didn't get anywhere. But, I'm always driving through that place, and I've never seen anything that's been, crazy. Actually, Rio Grande's kind of pretty in different places.
Now,
Big Bend, for example, there's some places where it's just, it's a trickle.
Mhm.
You know?
that's and I just kind of wonder what when it comes to the border, are there simultaneously Texas, what would we call them? Texas military or
A
militia?
military, yeah. Now,
That's so weird. I've never thought of the word military used in aside from not at the federal level, just at the state level.
well, again, it's a responsibility of states, and again, this goes way back before we had the military that we have right now to have something ready in case
But
it gets called up.
Is that the same thing as National Guard?
Yeah, similar. Well, Texas National Guard. There's a Texas Air National Guard and all of that.
And just out of curiosity, all these National Guards, are they federal or are they state?
Well, they're a combination of both, and they're different types. But it's somebody that there's some that are fully federal. There's some that are state, but can be called up by the national government.
Mm.
If we look at open up Article 2 of the Constitution, we can see some stuff that says that the President is Commander-in-Chief of the United States and of the militia of the United States, and of the militia of the several states when called into service of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have these things kind of ready to go. Remember, that was one of the original purposes of the Second Amendment. Because when the United States was still pretty not developed, they didn't have guns for you, so you come with a gun, ready to go. But anyway, I mean, this is just one particular part of it. But certainly there are a variety of other sorts of cases that are kind of brewing related to this sort of thing.
I mean, one thing I just would want to know is that, what part are there part of the borders that are being watched over by Federal Border Patrol versus Texas
It would
officials?
all be looked at by federal. I could not answer the question about Texas officials. But if you go along the border, I mean, even places, the walls, there's different places where you have walls. Around cities, around El Paso, around Laredo and all that, I have not, like I said, I haven't been to Eagle Pass in some time. Del Rio, I can't remember what it's like there. There's some other places where you see hardly anything. There's a beautiful little town called Roma that's right on it. You don't have a wall. But what you have in some of the places that there's just the border, I've noticed you'll have some kind of fencing and whatnot, and I think the fencing isn't really on the border. I think the fencing is kind of like on the American side by a few hundred yards or whatnot. But you'll have, like, let's say 10, 15, 20 feet of land, and you'll have on a regular basis tractors will drag something behind them to sort of like clear it. And I guess the idea was you could see if any there are
Yeah.
steps across it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you got plenty of folks. I mean, you don't have to drive too far to see a bunch of Border Patrol folks. Last time I was in, I think it was August, in Laredo, and I drove away. I've got family in Laredo. The little towns called like Rio Bravo and things like that are right on El Cenizo, right on the border. And I went to, I think it was Rio Bravo. Yeah, and I went to check out the river, and you just had some Border Patrol agents in their cars, just kind of like sitting, looking at stuff, not really doing anything. They didn't hassle me. It's one of the things too. When I'm driving through, they look at me and they're like, "Yeah, go on."
I'm just trying to imagine the situation where Federal Border Patrol would like cross path with like Texas
Like
military
this.
or whatever.
That's what's happening here.
And what that whole situation is like. I mean,
I don't know.
do they start
That's a
throwing
good
rocks at each other, or like somebody cuts a wire and someone comes and then like mends it, and then they're kind of low grade conflict. I'm really, I mean, I don't want that stuff to happen, but I think
They
that
all
would be
got guns,
fascinating
yeah.
to see what that interaction would be like.
They fight with each other. Next thing you know, a guy with a big bag of fentanyl just kind of sneaks off to the side. He's in San Antonio before nightfall. No, but as far as like the conflict between the agents, I don't really know. I mean, maybe there isn't. I have a hunch there probably isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the conflict is probably that happens a little bit more up the ladder. Between
yeah.
the governor and the president.
I would imagine
like
that.
Too, yeah.
So what's your take now looking ahead, what things we have to look out for
For this
topic?
Well, it's going to heat up because we got an election coming up.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. You know, you got some folks that are terrified of everything related to the border, and that's good for driving some people out to vote. You know, so I think that I think more about how people react to it and what sorts of news items take hold. Now, in terms of the actual numbers and stuff like that, I mean, that's one of the things I'm trying to learn a little bit more myself. And what I don't know how people interpret it and what people say. There's some folks are saying like, we've got 10 million people crossing the border. We're not. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have what the estimates are. I'm not really sure, but when you have like a lot of detentions, that means that people are actually being stopped, people being processed, and there are certain folks, migrants and whatnot, that are able to go through. And now you asked a good question that I can't answer precisely, specifically where. I know there are a variety of different places. Some of these are available to see, and some of them are not. They're kind of like secret detention centers, too. It's almost like, I don't know, quite 9/11 stuff, but, you got that also. Are there people here that just disappear? The specifics of that I can't answer. I'm a little bit more interested in it, but there you go.
All right, election year. We got a hot topic, so we'll stay on top of this one and see where it goes.
Yeah. Right. Very good.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
You're welcome, Albert.